Alright, let's be honest about Aquaman. And this review will be completely spoiler free, so you guys have nothing to worry about. By the way, if my voice sounds a little weird, that's because I'm using a different microphone because my other one is getting fixed, or I'm getting a new one or something like that. Also, before we jump in, let me preface this by saying I know this review is super late. Aquaman was released way back last month on December 21st, and I wasn't originally going to review this. Hell, I didn't even know for sure if I was going to see it in theaters. But long story short, I had plans the other night and our plans changed, so we ended up going to the theater instead and we ended up seeing Aquaman. And I asked on Twitter and Instagram if people wanted to see a review of Aquaman despite it being released in December, and literally everyone voted yes. So here we go. Let's dive in and I'll give you my thoughts on Aquaman and let you know if it's worth seeing in theaters or seeing it all. First impressions. When I watched the trailers, I wasn't overly hyped for this movie. I thought it looked interesting, I knew I wanted to see it at some point, but I wasn't sure if I was going to see it in theaters or not. Anyway, here's the first thing I will say about this movie. It's absolutely fucking gorgeous. I haven't felt this much joy looking at the beautiful scenery in a movie since The Revenant. However, most of the scenery in this movie was CGI, and in The Revenant, that shit was real. But regardless, this was such a pretty movie. The colors popped, the scenery was gorgeous, and the cinematography was next level. I thoroughly enjoyed the hell out of the visuals. And at the same time, I didn't like them. Yeah, I know, it sounds contradictory, but it's true. In some shots, the CGI looked pretty decent, but in other shots, oh boy. So clearly, they can't film the whole movie underwater. So I know there has to be a ton of green screen. And I didn't really have much of a problem with the underwater scenes. The waviness of the water on people's faces was a bit jarring at times, but overall, the underwater effects were fine. For the most part, it was the shit on land that bothered me. First of all, what is up with the fucking green screen dock? When I first saw the trailers for this movie, and I saw some of the characters standing on a dock, I remember thinking it looked terrible. But I reminded myself that this movie was still months away, and they still have time to perfect the CGI. Well, they didn't. Not for the dock scenes, at least. It looked fucking terrible. Like, what? You couldn't find a real dock to film on? Seriously? And since we're on the topic of bad green screens, there's a scene where Aquaman and Mera are in the desert walking on dunes, and holy fish fucking Christ, there's a quick shot of them standing on a dune, and the background is laughable. It doesn't even look like a green screen. It looks like someone printed out a picture of a sand dune and put it behind the actors. Seriously? This movie had a $200 million budget. You could have saved yourself some money and embarrassment by filming on a real dock and touching up some of the CGI, especially when they were in the desert. But as I said, for the most part, the visuals in this movie were solid. And then there were also times where it looked absolutely atrocious. I mean, they had $200 million. I don't know if they ran out of money or the special effects team just got lazy at some parts. I don't know what it is, because in some shots the CGI looked amazing, in other shots it looked fucking terrible. But as a whole, I think this movie looked pretty good. Story. Now, in my opinion, this is where the movie completely flops. While this movie is visually pleasing to look at, the story and script itself are absolutely atrocious. Tons of cringy dialogue, recycled story beats from other movies, incredibly predictable, yada yada. I feel bad for anyone watching this movie that's lactose intolerant because holy shit, you are gonna overdose on the amount of cheese this film has. There are so many cheesy lines. Several times throughout the movie, I said the lines before the characters on screen even finished them. I mean, this movie is predictable in every sense of the word. I just didn't find myself caring about the story at all. The plot was definitely lacking, and for the most part, it felt like shit just kinda happened. Characters. And when you have a shit story and script, shitty characters are kind of part of the package. So pretty much all of the characters in this movie are boring. Myself and many others I saw online were afraid that Jason Momoa's Aquaman was going to be a dumbed down, sort of cool, bro, surfer dude. Because in the trailers, you see Aquaman always saying, "Alright," and "my man," and "hell yeah." And unfortunately, that's mostly what his character is. Don't get me wrong, Aquaman is an absolute badass in this movie. But that's all he is. There's no depth. There are some moments in this movie where they try to slow things down and give Jason some more dramatic scenes, but it just doesn't really work at all. It's just fucking cheesy. And I don't think it's Jason's fault. I think he's a great actor. I think it's just a shitty script. Hell, I think all of the actors in this movie were fantastic. Except the teenage dude that played a younger Aquaman. Holy shit, he was fucking terrible. But like I said, the acting was good, but no amount of good acting can fix a bad script. So all of the characters to me just felt boring and shallow. Action. Along with the cinematography and some of the CGI, the action scenes in this movie were some of the best parts. During the first 5 minutes of the movie, Aquaman's mommy gets in a fight with a bunch of dudes in a house, and that scene is mostly a tracking shot, just following her as she beats the hell out of these guys, and it is such a well done scene, and it's so well choreographed, and it looks amazing. And from that moment going forward, I was thinking, oh, this is gonna be good, the action's gonna be kick-ass, and it was. Despite this being a superhero movie with tons of CGI, I could still comprehend what was happening in the action scenes. I loved the fight scene in Italy when Black Manta starts attacking them. Again, those tracking shots were fucking beautiful. When I saw part of this scene in one of the trailers, I was thoroughly impressed. It was one of the main reasons I wanted to see this movie. And perhaps my favorite scene in the entire movie is when Aquaman and Mera are on a boat and a bunch of Mirelurk Kings attack them. And let me tell you, this scene is absolutely fucking nuts. Anyway, you get to see a little bit of this in the trailers, but it doesn't do it justice. This scene alone made the movie ticket worth it. So just to give you a little bit of backstory without spoiling anything, these creatures are scared of light, and Aquaman lights a flare to get them to back off. And when they jump into the water, you can see literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of these creatures attack them and swarm around them. But they can only get so close because of the flare. I mean, this scene is absolutely breathtaking. So overall, the action was fantastic, but the way they incorporate the action into the movie is fucking hilarious and kind of dumb. Let me explain. So have you ever seen a movie where characters are just having a calm conversation and then a wall explodes and people just start attacking those characters? Yeah, that happens about 4 to 5 times in this movie. I'm not exaggerating. After the second time it happened, my buddy leans over to me and says, "Are they gonna do this every time there's an action scene?" And the third and fourth time it happened, we both busted out laughing. This movie knew its story was terrible, so whenever there was downtime, the producers were like, "Okay, this dialogue isn't good. Let's switch to some explosions without any transition whatsoever. People will love that shit." In closing, is this a movie worth seeing in theaters? I would honestly say yes. I do think you will have a good time with this movie if you turn your brain off and watch some cool action scenes. But if you're really picky about what movies you want to see in theaters, whether it's money issues or you just don't like going to the movie theaters at all unless it's a really good movie, then I would suggest waiting. Rent it in a few months. The biggest reason I would suggest watching it in theaters would be to experience the scale of this movie on a large screen with a surround sound system. But if you don't care about any of that, or if you have a great movie set up at home, then by all means, wait. This is not a must-see movie, but I'd recommend seeing it just to appreciate the cinematography and action scenes alone. And with that being said, I would give Aquaman a 6 out of 10. It's an average superhero film with recycled plot points and uninteresting characters and a boring story, but because of the action scenes and cinematography, I think this movie deserves a 6 out of 10. If this movie had a compelling story and script, it easily would have been one of my favorite movies of 2018. It had potential, but it fell short. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Aquaman. Have you seen Aquaman? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you tired of superhero movies? Just let me know in the comments what you think. Again, thank you for watching. Leave a like for more Let's Be Honest videos, and hope you guys have an awesome day. Here with you now.